When a woman cheats, the first thing she often says is a denial or an attempt to deflect blame, which is a natural reaction when someone feels cornered or confronted about a deeply emotional issue. One of the most common phrases she might use is, "You're overreacting." This simple sentence is designed to immediately downplay the situation and make you question your own perception of reality. It's an attempt to minimize the significance of the affair, as if your feelings and the betrayal you've experienced are exaggerated or unjustified. This tactic can be incredibly disorienting because it undermines your emotions and creates a sense of doubt about whether your reaction is even appropriate. By claiming that you're overreacting, she shifts the focus away from the core issue, her infidelity, and puts the spotlight on your behavior. This redirection is a form of manipulation, as it forces you to focus on the way you're handling the situation rather than the reason behind it. It's a defense mechanism that allows her to avoid any direct accountability for her actions. Instead of addressing the hurt caused by the betrayal, she subtly implies that your response is out of proportion, making it seem like you're the one who is out of line. Another common response could be, "This isn't what you think." This phrase is a variation of denial, where she tries to convince you that the situation is not as serious or damaging as it seems. She might claim that the affair wasn't a real emotional connection, or that it was a one-time mistake with no real meaning behind it. This tactic is intended to reassure you that there's no need for drastic actions or decisions. It's a way of making you feel like you're jumping to conclusions and that the affair doesn't represent any deeper issues within the relationship. This can be confusing and frustrating, especially when the facts seem undeniable. It places doubt in your mind, leaving you questioning whether you should even be upset in the first place. These early responses are often the first line of defense because in the initial moments of confrontation, she may feel an overwhelming need to protect herself from the guilt and shame that inevitably come with infidelity. Denial allows her to temporarily distance herself from the consequences of her actions. It's easier, at that moment, to pretend the affair wasn't as serious or significant as it actually was than to admit the truth and face the emotional fallout. When a woman cheats and tries to deny or downplay the situation, it can be a form of self-preservation. Admitting to the betrayal is not only emotionally difficult, but also risks destroying the relationship. So by denying the gravity of the situation, she buys herself time and attempts to protect the relationship, or at least her position in it. It might not even be a conscious strategy, but rather an automatic defense against the overwhelming guilt and fear of losing what she values. However, these denials don't erase the fact that infidelity has occurred. The truth doesn't go away no matter how much someone tries to mask it with excuses or attempts at minimizing its importance. While she may initially try to convince you that you're overreacting or that the situation is less severe than you think, you will still be left to wrestle with the emotional weight of the betrayal. The distance between what was said and what actually happened will only continue to widen, creating more tension and confusion. At some point, the facade of denial will break down, and the reality of the situation will force both of you to confront what has happened. The key to moving past this stage and any future conversations will be whether she is eventually able to take responsibility for her actions and acknowledge the hurt that was caused, rather than continuing to deny or downplay the situation. Only through honesty and vulnerability can there be any chance of healing or moving forward. The initial denial might be difficult to accept, but it's important to recognize it for what it is: a defense mechanism rooted in fear and guilt. Understanding this can help you better navigate the emotional landscape that follows such a painful revelation. When a woman cheats, one of the first things she might say is an accusation that you have neglected her emotionally. This response is often an attempt to shift the focus away from her actions and place some of the blame on the relationship itself. A common phrase she may use is, "You stopped paying attention to me," or "I felt ignored and unimportant." In these moments, she might try to create the illusion that her infidelity wasn't entirely her fault, suggesting instead that her emotional needs were left unmet by you. This line of reasoning seeks to justify the betrayal by presenting it as a reaction to a perceived failure on your part. The implication here is that, in her eyes, you became emotionally unavailable or perhaps even distant, and that this drove her to seek fulfillment elsewhere. It's a defense mechanism designed to rationalize her actions and create a narrative in which she was left with no other option but to look for emotional intimacy outside the relationship. By presenting herself as the victim of neglect, she not only avoids taking full responsibility for the affair, but also tries to make you feel guilty or responsible for the situation. It's not uncommon for this accusation to come after a period of tension or disconnection in the relationship. Often, when couples experience emotional distance or a lull in intimacy, it can leave one partner feeling alone or unnoticed. However, even in these situations, infidelity is never the only solution. The expectation of open communication and mutual effort to address these issues is vital. but her decision to cheat is a violation of trust that cannot be solely explained away by emotional neglect. Nevertheless, when faced with confrontation, shifting the blame onto you becomes an easy way to justify her actions. By claiming that she felt neglected, she's essentially suggesting that the affair was a consequence of your behavior. This kind of defense seeks to position the affair as an act of survival rather than an active choice to betray the relationship. In her mind, perhaps she didn't seek out the affair because of a lack of moral resolve, but because she had been emotionally starved for so long. This makes it easier for her to cope with the guilt of cheating, as she can tell herself she was simply responding to a need that wasn't being met, rather than acknowledging the deeper betrayal of her actions. This accusation can be particularly hurtful because it taps into your own insecurities and doubts about the relationship. You might already be questioning what went wrong, or you might feel like you failed in some way as a partner. Her words feed into this self-doubt, making it even harder to understand the reality of the situation. Instead of focusing on the affair itself, you're left questioning whether you were truly attentive enough, whether you missed signs of emotional dissatisfaction, or whether you could have done more. This emotional manipulation shifts the focus away from the real issue, the breach of trust, and redirects it to your own shortcomings, even if they weren't the root cause of her decision to cheat. Moreover, this type of justification often overlooks the complexity of relationships. Emotional neglect is real, but it's important to understand that it doesn't automatically give someone the right to betray their partner. So relationships require ongoing effort from both sides, but one person's emotional neediness or dissatisfaction doesn't give them carte blanche to disregard the commitment they made. Cheating in any form is a conscious decision to betray trust, regardless of any perceived emotional neglect in the relationship. In these moments, it's crucial to differentiate between the valid concerns she may express about emotional neglect and the manipulation that often accompanies her justification for infidelity. While it's important to listen to her feelings and understand if there were issues in the relationship that contributed to her dissatisfaction, it's equally important not to lose sight of the fact that infidelity is a betrayal that goes beyond any emotional need or neglect. The affair is a choice she made, and it's essential for both partners to recognize that responsibility. Her attempt to deflect the blame and accuse you of emotional neglect doesn't erase the pain of the betrayal. It only serves to complicate the emotional landscape, making it harder to confront the root cause of the infidelity. Moving forward, healing can only happen when both partners are able to take accountability for their actions, acknowledge the hurt caused, and work together if they choose to continue the relationship to rebuild trust. When a woman cheats, one of the first things she may say is an attempt to justify her actions based on external circumstances. This justification is often rooted in an emotional or situational crisis that she feels played a significant role in her decision to step outside the relationship. She might say things like, "I was going through a tough time," or "I wasn't happy," trying to present her infidelity as a reaction to the stress, disappointment, or unhappiness she was experiencing in her life. This defense is designed to contextualize her actions, suggesting that the affair wasn't a calculated betrayal, but rather a desperate response to personal struggles or dissatisfaction. When she claims that she was going through a difficult time, she may refer to a variety of external factors: stress at work, a loss of a loved one, family problems, or other emotional burdens that she feels overwhelmed by. These personal challenges may have left her feeling emotionally drained, vulnerable, or disconnected from her partner. In this moment of emotional turmoil, she may have believed that the affair provided a temporary escape, a way to feel seen, desired, or comforted in a way that her current relationship was not fulfilling. This kind of justification positions the affair as a coping mechanism rather than an act of betrayal. By invoking the notion that she wasn't happy, she shifts the focus to the emotional void she may have been feeling. She might describe how she felt unsatisfied or unfulfilled in the relationship, citing emotional distance, lack of communication, or unmet needs. This narrative paints her infidelity as an act of self-preservation, something she did to regain a sense of joy, attention, or validation that she was missing. The implication is that she didn't intentionally set out to hurt you, but rather was seeking something that she felt was lacking in her life. While it is true that emotional distress or dissatisfaction can lead to feelings of disconnection or longing, this justification for cheating is problematic because it oversimplifies the complexities of a relationship and the choices that come with it. Life's challenges don't give someone a free pass to hurt another person, and choosing infidelity as a solution reflects a profound disregard for the commitment and trust that are the foundation of a partnership. The justification based on tough times or unhappiness might make it easier for her to live with her actions, as it allows her to view the affair as a mere consequence of circumstances rather than a deliberate breach of loyalty. In these moments, she may also try to downplay the significance of the affair, making it seem less like an act of betrayal and more like a fleeting, inconsequential escape. She might suggest that the affair didn't mean anything or that it was just a momentary lapse in judgment. The goal is to reduce the emotional weight of her actions and make it seem like there's nothing about the affair that should fundamentally alter the relationship. She wants to convince both herself and you that it was not the result of a lack of love or commitment, but rather a temporary lapse caused by external pressures. This kind of justification can be incredibly frustrating for the partner on the receiving end of the betrayal because it minimizes the hurt caused by the affair. While it's understandable that people go through tough times and face personal challenges, it's crucial to recognize that these challenges don't excuse infidelity. A relationship is a space where partners should work together through difficult times, not use them as an excuse to abandon their commitment to one another. What she may fail to see in her justification is that a healthy relationship offers the opportunity for both partners to support each other, even in moments of crisis, rather than seeking solace in someone else. Furthermore, using tough times or unhappiness as justification for infidelity also implies that she didn't feel capable of communicating her struggles to you or working through them together. It suggests a breakdown in communication where, instead of addressing her dissatisfaction directly, she chose to bypass the relationship altogether. In doing so, she not only betrays your trust, but also dismisses the possibility of working through the issues that might have been contributing to her unhappiness. While her struggles may have played a role in her decision-making process, it's essential to recognize that the affair is a separate issue. The real question is why she felt that cheating was the solution to her unhappiness and whether there were other, healthier ways to address the emotional pain she was feeling. In the end, the justification based on external circumstances is just that, a justification. It doesn't excuse the choice to betray trust, and it doesn't make the hurt any less real. True healing and resolution can only begin when both partners confront the affair honestly and when responsibility is taken for the decision to step outside the boundaries of the relationship. When a woman cheats, one of the first things she might say is an attempt to shift the focus away from her actions by pointing to your flaws. This tactic is often used to deflect blame and avoid taking full responsibility for the betrayal. A common phrase she might use is, "You weren't meeting my needs," or "You didn't care about me the way I needed." In these moments, she's trying to make her infidelity seem like a response to your shortcomings rather than a conscious decision on her part. This approach can be particularly hurtful because it not only blames you for the affair, but also casts doubt on your role in the relationship, suggesting that you are somehow to blame for her decision to betray your trust. By saying you weren't meeting her needs, she's essentially making a claim that you failed in your role as a partner. This can encompass a wide range of accusations, from emotional neglect to a lack of intimacy or attention. She may feel that you weren't attentive enough to her feelings or that you didn't prioritize the relationship in the way she expected. This might stem from real or perceived gaps in the relationship, perhaps a breakdown in communications and how you interact, or unmet expectations. However, by framing the affair as a response to your failure, she is sidestepping her own responsibility in choosing to cheat. Instead of acknowledging that her actions were a result of her own decisions, she deflects the blame onto you, making it seem as though her infidelity was almost an inevitable consequence of your supposed neglect. When a woman uses this line of reasoning, it can make you question your own behavior and contributions to the relationship. You may find yourself asking if you truly did enough to support her emotionally, or if you missed signs of her unhappiness. The emotional manipulation embedded in these statements can leave you doubting yourself and wondering whether you are, in fact, responsible for the breakdown in your relationship. This creates confusion and guilt, making it difficult to focus on the betrayal itself and forcing you to grapple with the idea that you might not have been a good enough partner, even if that wasn't the true reason for her actions. This tactic is particularly effective because in any relationship, there are always moments of miscommunication or unmet needs. No partnership is perfect, and it's natural for both partners to have areas where they fall short. However, using these moments to justify infidelity is deeply unfair. It ignores the fact that relationships require open communication, mutual effort, and honesty to thrive. Rather than confronting her own feelings or discussing her dissatisfaction with you, she chose to cheat, and that is a choice that cannot be attributed solely to your perceived shortcomings. In addition to accusing you of not meeting her needs, she might also say, "You didn't care about me the way I needed." This statement is another attempt to paint the relationship as one where she felt unimportant, unloved, or unnoticed. It implies that your actions or lack thereof directly contributed to her feeling neglected or emotionally abandoned. Again, this statement makes the affair seem like a reaction to an emotional vacuum in the relationship, as though the affair was a necessary means of filling that gap. While it's possible that there were moments when you were distracted or not as emotionally available, it's important to recognize that her decision to cheat was not a healthy response to feeling neglected. It was a betrayal of trust, and no matter how much she might try to rationalize it, infidelity is not a reasonable solution to any emotional dissatisfaction. This tactic of blaming you for not caring enough can also be a way for her to avoid confronting the real reasons behind her decision to cheat. It shifts the focus from her own lack of integrity or self-control to your actions and inactions. By placing the responsibility on your perceived failings, she avoids taking ownership of her choice to cross a boundary that was meant to protect the relationship. It's easier, in her mind, to claim that the affair happened because you didn't love her the right way than to admit that she made a conscious choice to betray you. This tactic allows her to preserve her own image as a victim rather than someone who willingly made the decision to hurt another person. Furthermore, this line of reasoning can create a sense of guilt and self-doubt in the betrayed partner. You may start to question whether you truly did enough in the relationship, whether you could have been more attentive, more affectionate, or more present. These questions can be painful and overwhelming, especially when you're already dealing with the shock and heartbreak of discovering the affair. However, it's essential to remember that relationships are built on mutual effort and respect, and infidelity is never an appropriate response to unmet emotional needs. Ultimately, the accusation that you weren't meeting her needs or didn't care enough is a deflection from the real issue, her decision to cheat. By shifting the blame onto you, she avoids confronting the deeper issues within herself and the relationship. Healing from the situation will require both partners to take responsibility for their actions and address the real underlying problems, whether they are emotional, communicative, or otherwise. The betrayal cannot be undone, but the key to moving forward, if reconciliation is even possible, lies in recognizing that the affair was not your fault and that both partners need to take accountability for the choices they made. When a woman cheats, one of the first things she might say is an appeal to a lack of intimacy, whether physical or emotional, within the relationship. She might say something like, "We've been distant for so long," or "I just needed to feel wanted." This response seeks to justify the affair by suggesting that her decision was driven by a need for connection and closeness that she felt was missing in her relationship. She may use these words to imply that her infidelity was not about seeking something outside of the relationship, but rather fulfilling a legitimate emotional or physical need that wasn't being met. The idea that the relationship has been distant or lacking in intimacy often stems from a growing emotional or physical disconnect between partners. Over time, as life gets busier or both individuals face their own personal struggles, relationships can sometimes experience periods of neglect, even if unintentional. This is a normal challenge in many relationships. However, rather than acknowledging that both partners may have contributed to the growing distance or discussing the issues openly, she might use her feelings of unmet intimacy as an excuse for seeking out someone else. Her statement about being distant may also reflect a sense of frustration or loneliness she has been experiencing for some time. The emotional distance between the partners can make her feel disconnected, overlooked, or even rejected. She might feel that the bond that once existed has eroded and that she is no longer the priority in her partner's life. This can be a painful experience, and it's possible that she truly feels a sense of loss or abandonment. However, it's important to recognize that feeling neglected or distant does not justify breaking the trust in a relationship through infidelity. Relationships are complicated, and challenges like these should ideally lead to conversations, not secretive betrayals. In some cases, when a woman says, "I just needed to feel wanted," she's suggesting that the affair was an attempt to restore her self-esteem or affirm her worth. Perhaps she felt invisible in the relationship or believed that her emotional or physical needs weren't being acknowledged. The idea of being wanted can manifest in different ways, whether it's a desire for more attention, affection, validation, or even physical intimacy. When she says this, she may be indicating that the relationship had fallen into a routine where emotional and physical closeness had become scarce, making her feel undesirable or unloved. However, just like with the previous justifications, this explanation ignores the fact that infidelity is an unhealthy and unfair way to address these needs. Instead of expressing dissatisfaction or seeking ways to reignite intimacy within the relationship, she chose to cross the boundary and betray the trust that had been established. Feeling wanted or appreciated should have been something that was communicated and worked on within the relationship. Instead, choosing to cheat becomes a form of escapism, attempting to solve the problem in an external way rather than facing it with the person who was supposed to be her partner. Her attempt to justify the affair with this appeal to intimacy also serves to avoid confronting her own behavior and choices. By suggesting that the lack of intimacy is to blame, she deflects attention from the fact that she willingly chose to violate the relationship. She might try to convince herself that the affair wasn't a betrayal because it was simply an emotional response to a genuine need. This makes it easier for her to rationalize her actions, but it doesn't make the affair any less hurtful or damaging. This justification can also make the betrayed partner feel as if they are responsible for the affair. If you're already struggling with feelings of guilt or questioning your own actions in the relationship, her words might make you feel like you failed her in some way. You might start to believe that if you had been more attentive or affectionate, the affair wouldn't have happened. This line of thinking is emotionally manipulative because it places the blame for the infidelity on you when in reality, her decision to cheat is the result of her own choices, not your actions alone. No matter how distant a relationship may become, there are always healthier ways to address the issues: communication, seeking therapy, or taking time to reconnect, not betrayal. Moreover, it's important to recognize that intimacy isn't just about physical affection. Emotional intimacy is just as important in maintaining a healthy and connected relationship. Her statement that she needed to feel wanted may be a reflection of a deeper emotional longing that wasn't being communicated or understood. But again, the solution to this issue should never have been infidelity. A strong, trusting relationship allows space for both partners to express their emotional needs and work together to find solutions, not to seek those solutions outside the relationship. In the end, justifying infidelity by pointing to a lack of intimacy is an attempt to avoid responsibility and make her actions seem like a natural response to emotional deprivation. While it's true that intimacy is essential in any relationship, cheating is never the appropriate way to address its absence. The real issue here is not simply the lack of intimacy, but rather the breakdown of trust and communication. Healing from the betrayal will require both partners to address the root causes of the disconnect and to work on rebuilding the intimacy and connection that was lost. But that can only happen if both individuals take accountability for their actions rather than relying on justifications that avoid the heart of the issue. When a woman cheats, one of the first things she might say is an expression of regret or an attempt to salvage the relationship by emphasizing that she never intended for things to get so far. Phrases like "I made a mistake" or "I never meant for it to go this far" are common attempts to manage the guilt and shame that come with infidelity. These statements are often used as a way to backpedal from the painful reality of the affair and create an opening for reconciliation. By saying that the affair wasn't part of her original intention, she is trying to minimize the emotional weight of her actions and create the illusion that it was a momentary lapse in judgment. This line of reasoning is often used as an emotional defense mechanism, attempting to ease her own guilt. It suggests that the affair wasn't a deliberate betrayal, but rather something that spiraled out of control. In her mind, she might genuinely believe that things simply went too far, or that circumstances led her to make a choice she never intended to make. This form of justification is often meant to avoid taking full responsibility for the affair, as it frames the situation as something that happened almost by accident or due to unforeseen circumstances. However, the reality is that cheating is rarely an impulsive or accidental act. Affairs typically develop over time, often with conscious decisions along the way. When she says "I never meant for it to go this far," she might be trying to convince both herself and you that the affair was not a reflection of her true feelings or intentions. But the truth is that an affair doesn't happen in isolation. It involves multiple choices, moments of opportunity, and decisions that ultimately lead to crossing a line that should never have been crossed. Even if the affair started innocently or without clear intent, it became a betrayal the moment she decided to act on those feelings. Saying it went too far is an attempt to excuse the betrayal, suggesting that it was somehow out of her control. These statements may be made in an attempt to alleviate the emotional impact of the situation, both for herself and for you. She might fear that acknowledging the full extent of her actions will result in the end of the relationship. By claiming it was a mistake or something that spiraled beyond her control, she's trying to hold on to the possibility of repairing things. It allows her to hope that you might eventually forgive her and that the relationship can be salvaged. This is a desperate plea for understanding, trying to show that the affair wasn't a reflection of her true feelings for you, but rather an unfortunate misstep or lapse in judgment. The problem with this justification is that it undermines the depth of the betrayal. The affair wasn't just a mistake or an unfortunate incident, it was a deliberate choice, one that involved both emotional and physical decisions. While it may be true that people sometimes make poor choices in moments of emotional vulnerability or distress, infidelity is still an active decision to break the trust between partners. Claiming it was just a mistake downplays the pain that you are feeling and reduces the affair to a minor error rather than the breach of trust that it truly is. This kind of justification can make it harder for you to process the situation because it minimizes the weight of what's been done to you. In addition, by framing the affair as something that went too far, she may be implying that she wasn't fully aware of what she was doing at the time. It suggests that she wasn't in control of her actions, which can be frustrating because In most cases, people are fully aware of their choices in the context of infidelity. Saying that it went too far is an attempt to deny agency over her own actions, as if the affair just somehow unfolded without her being a willing participant. This can make you question her true feelings and commitment to the relationship. If she wasn't aware of how far things were going, it raises the question of how emotionally connected she truly was to the relationship in the first place. Furthermore, when she expresses regret and says she never meant for it to go this far, she is also trying to diminish the sense of betrayal. This statement is often an attempt to make you believe that, despite what has happened, she still cares for you deeply and never intended to hurt you. She may genuinely feel remorse, but that remorse doesn't erase the fact that her actions have caused significant pain. Regret doesn't change the reality of the situation, it doesn't undo the trust that has been broken. While it's natural for her to feel regret, this shouldn't overshadow the fact that the affair has already deeply impacted the relationship. In the end, statements like "I made a mistake" or "I never meant for it to go this far" are efforts to deflect the full responsibility of the affair and present it as something that simply happened rather than a conscious betrayal. While it's understandable that she might feel remorseful and want to repair the relationship, healing can only occur when both partners confront the reality of what happened and take full responsibility for their actions. Regret can't change the past, but accountability can help pave the way for healing, if both individuals are willing to address the core issues that led to the betrayal.